When I was just a young lad, I'd watch pretty much any show or movie involving a dog, because based on my personal experience, dogs had a tendency to make anything at least 60% better. If there was a dog, it'd be safe to assume that I was watching it and that the dog was also my favorite character. So when a little series called Courage the Cowardly Dog debuted in late 1999, it was required viewing for me. I mean, just look at this guy. Pink puppies aside, however, there was another important aspect of this show, one that clashed greatly with another deeply held principle that my younger self believed. Scary is bad. Complete transparency here, I was not a fan of anything that really spooked me. Like, take Goosebumps for example. Sure, they had a dog in the intro, but you see it get possessed in real time by the spirit of spook, and I was not having any of that. They took something pure and ruined it, and now we all have to live with it. But when it came to Courage, there was something undeniably special about it that managed to keep me hooked for the entirety of its run, even if it did like to test my limits. It was a different beast entirely, mixing the creepy characters and vibes of Nowhere with zany humor and a brand of cartoon violence that echoes old classics like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. Originally, seen as how it's currently the season for all things spooky, that's October if you're watching this in one of the other 11 months out of the year, I was planning on talking about the series as a whole. But as I reached the end of my binge and I got to the final episode, inspiration struck and I just couldn't stop thinking about how much I love this episode and what it sets out to accomplish, especially given the fact that it was what the series officially ended on. The episode starts off rather unspectacularly, as Courage is helping Eustace with changing a tire on the truck. And by helping, I mean he's literally just doing all of the work. But after Courage accidentally tips the truck over, Eustace scolds him severely for not just what happened with the truck, but how Courage went about handling all of his other chores around the farm. Painting the chicken coop, fixing the windmill, all things that dogs technically should be unable to do. Yet I find it funny that Eustace is giving his dog all of these responsibilities that no normal dog can do, and then getting upset with him. Like, dude, what do you expect?
Loser! You're a loser! Are you feeling sorry for yourself?
But that's not the point here. What I noticed here is that in these examples that Eustace brings up, Courage didn't technically do anything wrong. He just went about performing the task he was given in his own way. I mean, sure, that's not really how you go about fixing a windmill, but you can't say that he didn't try. But as the day goes on, the feelings of inadequacy start to grow stronger within Courage, as he fails to help Muriel with her new baklava recipe. He rolls the dough too hard, resulting in it turning to dust, and then he accidentally smashes the table into pieces after failing to crack a stubborn walnut. As opposed to the reaction that he got from Eustace earlier, Muriel tells him calmly not to worry about it and continues on. And while that's a much kinder reaction, it's hollow and devoid of any constructive criticism or advice that can help Courage improve. Muriel, of course, isn't masking any sort of frustration towards Courage here, as she is very much the nurturing grandmother type, but that kind of response can be just as disheartening as well, making Courage think that maybe he's holding her back by having her cover for his mistakes. And it's immediately after this exchange that we are suddenly introduced to the villain who is known as the Perfectionist. At first glance, the Perfectionist feels like a weird villain to end the series on, seeing as how in comparison to the wide range of antagonists that the show has given us, even the ones that could be considered more realistic, she's literally just a mean teacher.
You're not the least bit perfect.
But she's more than that. A lot more, actually. And that's because she never actually existed to begin with. The Perfectionist is a manifestation of Courage's inner critic, brought about by his frustration and disappointment at his failures, letting down both Muriel and Eustace when all that he's trying to do is be helpful. But what do I mean by saying the inner critic, though? Well, the inner critic is a popular term that's used in psychology that refers to the voice in our heads that, while at times can help guide us to make the right decisions and keep us safe, it can also be extremely harsh, leading to feelings of guilt, shame, anxiety, and depression at even the smallest of errors that one might make. It can be incredibly debilitating to someone's physical and mental well-being, as displayed by Courage throughout the episode. And I believe that his creation of the Perfectionist is brought on by his absolute biggest fear, which isn't actually the creepy characters that arrive at his doorstep every week, but rather not being useful to his family. Despite the lack of strictness in Courage the Cowardly Dog's continuity, we have seen this good boy go above and beyond to protect Muriel and Eustace throughout the entire series. Muriel and Eustace have vastly different relationships with Courage. Eustace seeks to actively demean and antagonize him at every turn, while Muriel plays the role of being a supportive lap to sit on, and this is demonstrated by the responses to Courage's mistakes. While yes, Eustace is pretty much the only one who is at fault here for being as mean as he was, Muriel's unperturbed response triggers something in Courage, almost as if he feels guilty for not being scolded by her for not being perfect. We as an audience know very well that Muriel is just a sweet and unassuming lady that loves her dog, so it isn't like she's trying to spare his feelings by not being honest, but Courage feels differently about it. He soon subjects himself to lessons in being perfect, only to end each task with his spirits lower than before. We even have a cameo from Dai Lung, whose appearance could potentially crack a hole in my theory about this all being in Courage's head, but my assumption is that this is meant to serve as an example of comparing yourself to others, which is yet another trick that the inner critic likes to pull in order to bring you down. And I think that this works well, as Dai Lung is the kind of recurring character that likes to keep up the appearance that he's this successful guy with no flaws, despite his massive ego constantly getting the better of him. But after a rough day of failures, Courage turns in for the night with the assignment of sleeping perfectly in his head, which only leads to him having a series of stress-induced dreams. And while the Perfectionist may not be the coolest of villains, this scene makes it up to us by giving us one of the most iconic abominations that this show has ever produced. You're not perfect. Yeah, if we took away anything from this episode as kids, it was definitely him. He's known as the Bugle Monster, referring back to the cracked bugle that Eustace receives in the mail earlier in the episode, which carries significance to it, but I'll elaborate on that more in a minute. I could spend an obnoxious amount of time going over what each of these dreams is meant to convey, as well as how each one utilizes a different style of animation, but for the sake of brevity, these dreams are a direct result of Courage not immediately meeting this new set of expectations that he is trying to establish for himself. And if you've ever had stress dreams before, you can understand very quickly just how upsetting they can be. The sun rises on a new day, and after a rude awakening by Eustace, Courage is immediately thrust back into the classroom. But after the rough night that he's had, he excuses himself briefly to use the bathroom. And it's here that, much like with the appearance of the Perfectionist, another vision appears before Courage. But this time around, things go a bit differently.
There's no such thing as perfect. Huh? You're beautiful as you are, Courage. With all your imperfections, you can do anything.
Much akin to the Bugle Monster, this brief moment not only calls back to a visual element from earlier in the episode, but it seems to be one of the most impactful of the series for fans, likely due to the fact that it's a great mixture of both what the f***, but also wholesome, both tones that the series has shown clear mastery of over the course of its run. And it's even more wholesome when interpreted as a message from Courage's subconscious, telling him that he doesn't have to put himself through all of this pain in order to meet the unrealistic expectations that he has placed upon himself. Nothing in this world is perfect, which is immediately demonstrated to Courage after he leaves the bathroom and sees that both Muriel, who could not manage to make her baklava correctly, and Eustace, who is now finding enjoyment through his cracked bugle, are not just happy, but reveling in the imperfections of what they have. And so, with this newfound confidence, Courage returns to the Perfectionist, drawing a number 6 in the most Courage way that he can. And she gets so angry at the sight of his creation that she just melts, Wicked Witch of the West style, in a puddle of fury. And with his final foe of the series vanquished, Courage heads downstairs to triumphantly eat imperfect baklava with Muriel and Eustace. And as they share their meal, they all laugh together, ending the series on a very positive and heartwarming note. Up until I started going through the catalog of Courage episodes, I had no clue that this was the final episode. And it was weird to me as well that it came after Remembrance of Courage and not before, as on the surface, Remembrance of Courage feels more like a series finale, given how lore-focused it is. But I think that Perfect is just as solid of a choice, as it makes the final villain of the series an internal one. No offense to any of the evil veterinarian fans out there, he's just about as par for the course as a Courage villain can get in my opinion. Perfect gives us not just a memorable episode, but an important lesson to take away from it as well. Throughout life, we struggle so much with trying to meet the expectations of others, and in the process of doing that, we place a completely different set of expectations on ourselves that nobody even asked of us. And this can be incredibly damaging to our well-being. Speaking from personal experience, I've always been terrified of failure and rejection. I still am to a degree, but it was most prevalent in my high school and college years. I found that I always did my best when preparing for things in my own way, and not only would that not work all the time, but when I failed, I would take it pretty personally. But now I'm older, and while those failures were still painful for me to experience in the moment, they were important milestones in my growth as both an artist and a human being. Even if I was being treated unfairly by someone else or beating myself up for not being perfect, I can reflect on those feelings and take away something more meaningful. And the lesson that I choose to take is that I will never be perfect, but so will everyone else. Because perfect is an impossible concept that no one could ever truly achieve. By accepting my flaws and choosing to grow, I will not only fail less, but I'll be happier as a result. This episode was a great reminder of that, and if this video has you curious to go back and watch this episode, I hope that you do. In fact, go back and rewatch the entire show while you're at it, because it's seriously a masterpiece. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. This video was especially rewarding for me to work on, as it not only started as something completely different from what it ended up becoming, but it was also very inspiring to me, and I hope that maybe it helped inspire you as well. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could not only throw me a like, but maybe even leave a comment too. Whether it's about this video, future videos you'd like to see me do, or even just about your favorite moments in Courage the Cowardly Dog. My personal favorite is the song from the Dr. Gerbil episode. Oh, and also subscribe too if you haven't already. That would be, dare I say, perfect.